Thank you so much for joining us today, everybody. Those of you that are new watchers to this, we do a webinar every month. It's the last Wednesday of the month, apart from December, where we bring it forward for Christmas. And we try and give you the most exciting and entertaining guests on these webinars. They're completely free. They're meant for you to enjoy and hopefully take something away from. I'm joined today by a very good friend of mine and a very good friend of Thrive. Ruth and I have worked together now for just over a year in various different iterations, and we're continuing to build out a program of work this year. And getting Ruth, who's very busy, very important, to come and agree to do this webinar is just fantastic. I'm not going to say any more because Ruth will probably be talking about her journey on arriving to this webinar for your education and entertainment today. So on that note, Ruth, it's over to you. I'm going to be in the background. The chat should be enabled for everyone. If you've got any questions for Ruth, chuck them in the chat. Whether or not she'll look at them until the end, that's her prerogative. But please get those questions coming over.
Oh, we've got a raised hand already.
Raised hand. We don't actually allow anyone to talk because we're not that nice, but it might be that is not actually enabled yet. Here we go, saying that everybody can chat. No, they can't. I've now enabled the chat. So thank you, Sharif, for pointing out that the chat wasn't enabled. So everyone, hello. Right. No problem at all, Shanaz. That was brilliant. Ruth, without that little to do, it's over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Simon. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome. I'm Ruth Harrison-Swift. And as Simon said, I've been working with Simon and Thrive for quite a while now. I've lost count. He's clearly counting. Today, I'm going to be talking with you about change and transition and how it impacts our life and across the workplace as well. Nothing happens in life without it impacting every part of our lives. So without further ado, I will carry on. And Simon and I just noticed that I'm wearing the same cardigan today that I've got on the PowerPoint presentation. Perhaps that's to do with change. Maybe I don't actually like wearing my other cardigans because this is like my old friend. Who knows? Let's begin. So just to share with you that everybody is unique, and I really recognize that it's important for our psychological safety to make sure that you are in the right place. Some of the content I bring up today, you might find painful or upsetting in some way. So please contact me separately out of this if you would like to talk about that further. But I will continue. So when change happens, the journey that follows is called transition. That particular photograph was part of my own transition after a huge change. So I'm sure you can imagine what that involved. One of my favorite photos. So have any of you heard of Alice in Wonderland? There's my first question, of course. So Alice in Wonderland is a story all about her going through a huge change, falling down the rabbit hole, and what comes next is lots and lots of transitions. So Alice went through a great big journey to I'm going to get on the right board here so I can share with you everything. So some of the characters that will be on some of the slides today are all from Alice in Wonderland. So first of all, if we look at what is change, and my mouse isn't in the right place again. Silly mouse, bear with me. There's a mouse in Alice in Wonderland as well. There it is. So there we are. Change is inevitable. Society forces us to change. It's vital to economic growth, and so-called progress means change. We can't get away from it. We also have to support the personal growth that goes along with it, and find that we have to continue to change after metamorphosis into the next version of ourselves. Now, because society works so quickly and things go so quickly now, we're not actually designed to be this fast. Our brains weren't made to cope with the speed at which we are expected to transition. It is normal and it's natural. However difficult it might be, it is normal and natural. And we're not designed to stay in the same status that we were when we were born, for example. That wouldn't get us very far. And what would the point of life be other than being a cute baby for a short period of time? So thinking about those sorts of little things is relevant as well. And something else that's very natural and normal is the seasons. We are we're very much in the depths of winter at the moment, albeit a mild one. I should touch wood for that. But we will be coming into spring soon and to summer. And on, and every year we have this same growth. We will go into seeing some of you will already have seen some of the bulbs coming out from the ground. And towards the end of the year, they will lay dormant for a while, they will rest. We don't get the opportunity to do that as humans. However, it is still important that we accept change and what it's there for. So it is needed for growth as well. So, oops, come back, Alice. There we are. So an example of growth that we could use today would be when our company that we work for or that we run grows far quicker than we anticipated. It may take the founders a little bit of stumbling to get through the changes that they need to make. And it makes it harder for those of us who are not the decision makers to cope with the transitions. It's tough for the decision makers to cope with the transitions as well, because they have to keep going so very quickly to keep up and watch out for their staff. But people can easily be lost in this sort of effect with new roles, new leaders, changing roles. But isn't that growth better than the company folding or stagnating and not going anywhere? Because that's when boredom and apathy steps in. So it is important that we embrace change. The difficult part is what comes after it. And how we handle it and how we navigate and how we take care of ourselves first and those around us can dictate the outcome of that change and how smooth the transitions are. And as I said before about the world being too fast for us now, sometimes constant change is overwhelming because we don't get enough time to do the smooth transitioning from the last change before we're going into the next one. So when there is change, that's the start of transition. And without a change, no transition begins. So Alice's change, forgive me, I'm having technical issues. There we are. Alice's change. So I'm sure you're all familiar with the story. I'm a massive fan of Alice in Wonderland. The story is filled with miscommunication, misunderstanding, just like real life, really, no different to real life. There's misunderstanding everywhere. Alice's change might be compared to starting a new job, for example, figuring out new characters around her, what she's supposed to be doing there. And as if you can recall any of the events in Alice's journey, from falling down the rabbit hole, she's really not sure what's going to happen next. And to a degree, she has to go with the flow. So I'd like to have a think now and take this home with you. If you want to make a note of it, it's something to take home with you as well, is to think about some changes that might have impacted you. So I'm going to come back to that again at the end of this slide. So I'm just going to flip to the next bit for you. Change impacts what? There it is. Well, change impacts absolutely everything. Can you think of anything where a change happens and it hasn't impacted you? Simple things, leaving school, buying a new house, getting a car, starting a new job, going into a new relationship, coming out of a relationship. There's lots of life events that are huge changes that we all go through. And it does impact everything that we touch. And everything that happens to us impacts our work as well. Coming along to Alice again here. Do we have a choice about change? I'd like to know everybody's thoughts on that, actually. Do we have a choice? I'm of the opinion that we don't always have a choice, but actually, sometimes we're the ones that instigate the change. For example, like going into a new relationship or coming out of, or choosing to take the next job, or choosing to start a new hobby. We are making that choice. We are actively making the change. So accepting that what comes with that change are going to be little steps of transition, that's the bit that happens. So to get our best outcomes, think about what your options are. So exploring what our options can be will help the transition go even more smoothly than we could ever have imagined. And I would encourage you to think about what you can do for yourself to cope with the changes that you have, that you instigate or that you experience. For example, if Alice is starting a new job, she wanders around. She's not too afraid of figuring out what's what and going to find something new, even if it does say drink me, eat me, and it changes her size in ways that she wasn't quite expecting. So coming on next to transition. So T is for transition. And so what is transition? So when there is a change, that is the start of transition. And transitions always begin with an ending, because if something doesn't end, there can't be a new beginning. There's a lot of research been done on this over the years, and I'm quite fascinated with it, having been through quite a few changes and transitioning myself. And I think I'd like to think of myself as an experienced transitioner. We all are, actually. So how does it feel to you when change is thrown at you? We all perceive things differently. We all take things a different way. Was it personal? Did they just not like me? Or actually, I must be doing a really good job to get that promotion. Do I really want it? All of these things, change can really flood us with lots of different feelings. It can be disorientating. And for Alice, for example, this natural process of disorientation and reorientation happens quite a lot throughout her story, as it does throughout our lives. So first of all, we might feel a little bit lost, and then something along our way makes us think, oh, actually, no, I can manage that. That's okay. And we feel reoriented again. Now, she still had a huge journey to go through, just as we all do. And we will have lots more transitions along the way. So it is how we cope with all of those transitions. Now, with Alice, she pretty much went along with everything that came her way. And as we'll see, perhaps not always gracefully, or perhaps a better way to say is not as expected. It was a journey of decisions for her. Some of them were easier than others, and some of them were a bit more challenging. But one of the things that Alice says in the book that I particularly like this phrase, and it's one of her ways of coping and managing. She says, I can't go back to yesterday because I was a different person then. Very wise words, Alice, thank you. So who and what is impacted by change? This is a picture of Alice swimming in her own tears. She'd grown very big, of course, with one of the potions, or maybe it was the mushrooms, I do get confused. And as a result of then drinking and eating other mushrooms and other potions, she shrinks again. But when she's very big, she has this huge, big cry. And as we can see in this picture, she's quite small, smaller than the pelican in the story. And they're all swimming in her own tears. She's not the only one who's become disoriented again. She's impacting everybody around her. So that's something that we can look at as well, is who does it impact? Well, it impacts us as individuals. It impacts our relationships with our friends and our family. It can have a direct impact on our family as well, because it might cause complications for them too, whatever we're going through, quite regularly. In work, it can affect our clients. In larger organizations where people's personal transitions in life are not accepted as a normal thing, it may mean that there is disruption within the business while the company attempts to cope with this person not coping terribly well, when what they could be doing is just supporting a little bit more, being aware. So employees at all levels can be impacted by personal life transitions, because life is too busy now to segregate like it was in the 50s to segregate going into the office and having a home life as well. Everything is intertwined. We become friends with the people we work with. So when this sort of thing happens, companies can find that there is a loss of skill and knowledge, because the employees are looking for security, and if they're not getting it, they'll go somewhere else. So do you want to lose your trusted and valuable employees by not supporting them through these life changes? It can impact our mental health and the mental health of those around us. We have a basic human need for psychological safety. It's one of our most important things, is to feel safe. A roof over our head, a door so that the tigers can't come in and get us. When we don't feel like we're necessarily psychologically safe, which might be the case when we're in work, we end up masking. And I don't know if any of you are experienced with masking yourselves. I think most people have gone through periods of life, or always go through life masking to one degree or another, pretending everything's fine. And actually it's not, but they just become great actors at it. But masking is exhausting, and that can really, really impact family life, personal life, work life, and our mental health. So it's a very, very important aspect to consider. So The other thing it can impact is our finances. If we're not working because we don't feel comfortable to be there anymore, our finances are going to be impacted personally. Our finances are going to be impacted from an organizational point of view if we don't have the right staff doing the jobs that we need them to do. So it's important to think about everything as a whole picture. It's all very holistic, and keeping on top of everything that's going on for your employees and for yourselves is quite important to get the best out of your day, the best out of your life, and the best of your businesses. I will move on to the next slide. Thank you, Alice. There we are. Now here's life events. Alice has got all the cards throwing themselves at her. She's overwhelmed, utterly overwhelmed. So this section will involve a little bit of personal reflection. We don't have time for a great deal of this. So this, again, I invite you to take home with you and have a think about later on when you've got some time in your day. And make some time in your day to have a think about how you cope with this. Now, please make sure that you are comfortable to do this when you do it on your own. If you're not, then again, please get in touch. I'm more than happy to sit with you. We can create some group sessions as well, even that aren't recorded, so we can have some privacy. So I'm going to go through a list of events now that can impact our life events here. So we've got moving house, getting married and remarried, or remarried rather. We don't have to do it multiple times. But moving house can be said to be one of the most stressful things in life. But as stress is an internal thing, I like to think of it as one of the most major changes of life that brings on a lot of pressure. I will come back to the word stress in a little while. There's lots of movies about moving house. I like to link things to things that people might be able to relate to in real life. So think movies that link to moving house are things like Poor E.T., Different Planet. Can you imagine? Up and The Money Pit. Huge changes for those three major characters in there, sets of characters, and huge different circumstances and a massive amount of transition. Because remember, change happens like that. It's an instant. The transition is the process that comes from it. So the next one that's up there is getting married, or an alternative formal relationship commitment. We know how many steps there are in house moving and also in getting married. There are lots of steps in both of those events. In many events there are. And getting married is supposed to be one of the happiest days of our lives. But a lot of people say that they don't really remember the day they got married because they were so focused on making sure everything went right, that they've done so much in the lead up to make sure that everything was just perfect, that they really struggle to remember what happened. It feels more like a dream. So it's like they're waiting for the next thing to happen. They've got the flowers, they've got the dress, they've got the cake, they've got the rings. The day happens, and what's next? What's next? And rather than being in the moment and being mindful of the moment, it's a great big skip forward. So that's again a way that we can handle transition, is when we can feel ourselves going through something, it's just pause, be mindful of what we're thinking, how we're feeling about it, and then when we're ready, we can move into the next phase. So getting married can be quite stressful, and some people love it so much they do it quite a lot. But getting married or moving into a committed relationship doesn't look the same for everyone. And it can impact work as well. For example, a young woman announces to her boss she's getting married. And her boss might be thinking, without them having a conversation, oh, that means there are going to be babies soon. There's one assumption that may not be correct. Or it's her partner. Or well, maybe they're going to want a promotion to be able to pay for the growing family and a bigger car and a bigger house. Can I keep up with that? And so the disparity and the connection between employee and employer, that's where it can start to break down with this as an example. And it shouldn't be. It should be a time to celebrate. So again, likening this back to some movies like Mamma Mia, Splash, Yours, Mine and Ours, which was a blended family with 8 and 10 kids back in the 60s. There are lots of movies about marriage, remarriage, and blending and the transitions that take place within all of those things. Splash is one of my favorites. I mean, transitioning to and from being a mermaid, how cool would that be? Again, that's another conversation. So another huge step is pregnancy. From the perception of the parent through any conception challenges, because we won't know necessarily as employers whether our member of staff has had to go through IVF once, multiple times in order to get pregnant. We don't know what they're going through unless we are willing to have those conversations, unless we're willing to be human about the changes around us and the transitions that ensue. There are physical and emotional changes that are linked with becoming pregnant and throughout being pregnant, and huge brain changes in pregnancy. So what would it look like? What steps might there be, aside from obviously the basic one to get there in the first place? And how might it impact work? So there's some things to think about, that all of this we can go into in more detail for specific topics. But some great movies that link in with this are Look Who's Talking, Bridget Jones's Baby, and there's the one with the dads as well, the three dads with Tom Selleck, and I forgot the name of it, but I'm sure you all know which one that is. But how it impacts every life and the transitions throughout that, because of that change and throughout that path, can be quite phenomenal. And then we move into parenting. Now, one of the things I do is working for a lovely company in London, a coaching company, as a parental transition coach. And having been a parent myself, I still am a parent. I've gone from being in the corporate world to having a baby to becoming self-employed and retraining. So I've seen the transition, I've lived the transition, and I understand what happened here, as well as what happened with my body, as well as what happened with relationships around myself and my whole family. And it's a huge impact. And when we choose to go back to work, there are impacts there legally, emotionally, financially, that all need looking into, as well as supporting the core of who we are and having that balance of being a parent and a professional. There's a clue in the name there as to who I'm working with there. So the obstacles that the new parents have going back to work can impact normal functioning. Think about the lack of sleep, those sorts of things. And think about other complexities that might come in. So another one of our life events is getting divorced or separated. Now, this can often be an amicable picture just to protect our children, but it isn't always. And what someone might be going through and how it might impact them personally will impact what's going on in the workplace. Now, a lot of people will use work as a way to escape some reality, and that's okay, as long as work isn't actually impacted. So again, it's about keeping the conversations open. What can I do for you? You seem a little bit off today. What's anything you want to talk about? Do you want to go for a coffee? That sort of thing. Just approach things as a human being. That's the simple basis of all of this at the end of the day. But circumstances around divorce and separation can vary greatly. As with any of these things, they can vary quite a lot. So I would encourage you to think about how you can support your employees going through this, and yourself for that matter. So not to let you down on films here, we've got the First Wives Club. We've got Walk the Line, which is the Johnny Cash story. The very famous Kramer versus Kramer, which got quite colourful. And the Tonya Harding story, which was all around abuse, hidden abuse as well. So there's lots around this topic. Again, way too much to get into in detail today, but I hope I've given you enough to give you an idea. Then we move into the world of carers. Again, this is a huge topic, enormous topic, because carers aren't necessarily caring for somebody who is physically incapable of looking after themselves. They may be mentally incapable of looking after themselves, emotionally incapable. They may have a neurodiversity, which requires extra support and energy. So when mum or dad gets home, the neurodiverse child is collected from childcare. The energy that's required to get through a day at work and to get through the potential fallout from masking of the child throughout the day can take up an enormous amount of energy. So having the understanding in the workplace around the support for carers of people with neurodiversity, because it might not be the children, it might be their partner, their parent, a family member or friend living with them. There's still that dependency there. So, and at this sort of age as well, with caring and with divorce and separation, parenting, all that sort of thing, and the next one that we'll get onto, we're a bit of a sandwich generation, really. We've got our children still dependent, our parents becoming dependent, and we've still got to be out there in the workplace. So it can be quite tricky. So the next one I come on to is menopause, one of my favourite topics. And I have vast personal experience in this, not only in my own, but also in supporting other women and all the research that's done there and the workshops that I hold. So it was once called the change. And it is a change. Menopause happens, like I said before, click of the fingers, it's one day, it's a moment. And what leads up to it is the transition towards that change. And then what comes after it, in my case, for example, is the transition into, oh, okay, what happened to my brain? What do I do with all of this new stuff? So it's worth recognizing, and so valuable to recognize in the workplace how important it is for everybody around, everybody of any age as well, and any gender, to understand how menopause impacts a woman and how it impacts everybody around her. And that might not be the people you work with, it might be the people you live with. So it's definitely worth getting yourself educated on that. There's a new series, or recently new series actually, on Channel 4 called The Change, which was a comedy drama, quite amusing, if anybody's interested in watching something around that particular topic. So, just go back a thing there. A question for you. So, if you had one of those particular topics, moving house, getting married, pregnancy, parenting, getting divorced or separated, being a carer, or going through menopause, what might that look like for you? And what might it look like from the perspective of your colleagues or your management? I'm giving you an awful lot to think about today, so I hope that that's okay. And here is, where is she? Here is Alice. I like to think of this one of Alice sticking her neck out to fit in, to make things work, to do whatever it takes. And actually that looks quite uncomfortable, doesn't it? So there's lots of things that we can think of here around the other life events. So I'm just going to go through them quite quickly so we don't run out of time. Changing of job, changing career. You might change your job within the same company. Bird launching, otherwise known as empty nest syndrome. I don't like empty nest, it sounds very depressing to me. Bird launching to me is launching our offspring out into the world, nice and secure, knowing that they have the open arms of security there for them, rather than imagining weeping parents because there's nothing left in the nest. So bird launching, that's my top tip for you for today. Neurodiversity. Now, whilst neurodiversity is not in itself a life event, discovering that we have a reason that we didn't understand some situations, or that we misunderstood, or we struggle to communicate, focus. Dyslexia means that we may look like we're a little bit slow. Dyspraxia has us thinking we're too close. Spatial awareness can be very important to some people. And, in some cases, is that person playing rude? Or are they just autistic and call a spade a spade? And that's very literal, by the way. I was very careful with that one. So neurodiversity is a huge topic, and one that you'll have heard from on the Thrive webinars many times, I know. But it is really important that when that particular life awareness comes in, that can be a huge change for people actually accepting that there is something different in life. So it's helping to support them through that. And then, of course, there's loss and grief. Now, I'm not going to go into loss and grief very much at all today because it is a huge, huge topic. But it does impact every part of our lives. And they are two separate subjects, though intrinsically linked. So all of these events from both slides and the differences impact at all levels, leading to feelings and realities of loss and grief with every topic we've touched on. But this is not the place to explore that in depth today. So, what comes first? So endings always have a beginning. And bear with me a moment. There we are, technology. I really need a technology person with me while I do this, don't I? So endings always come first. That's just a simple fact. What we have to do with each ending is learn to let go. For every change, there has to be an ending. We can't have new habits, new jobs, new clothes without checking out the old ones, which is why I'm not getting rid of my cardigan, because I like it too much, so I'm not getting anything to replace it. But we do have to move on and let go of something before we can move forward. So something has to end before it can begin. Then we get to the neutral stage. And it's 3 stages. It's the stage of, well, who am I? And who do I want to become? Who have I become? The unknown of what's going to happen next, and where did that come from? And now how do I behave? Think about Alice when she's going through all those changes, and she's got a caterpillar with a hooker. There's lots of strange things happening, and these sorts of strange things happen to us in our lives, not caterpillars sitting on mushrooms. At least I hope not. Anyway, I haven't seen any. But we do see lots of things in life and experience lots of things that we say, well, where do I fit in this? So we have to be aware of all of these things around us and our reaction to it. Because the more aware we are of our own reactions, the more control we can have over them, and the more control we can have on how we deal with those transitions. So these are our signals to look out for as we slowly transform into who we are. So changes in the workplace, restructure, which can often lead to redundancy. It often leads to questions as, is my job safe? Is it not? When we'll find out. Or do I want it to be safe? Should I just take the money and run? Redundancy, restructure, target shifting, otherwise known as goalpost moving, I like target shifting, can all lead to an increase or decrease in workload. That really means motivation is required to keep going. Promotion is seen as a wonderful thing, but if we weren't looking for it, what if that takes us away from our family more than we want it to be? Or has us working from home when we want camaraderie of the office space, or vice versa? What about retirement? What happens when someone says they're retiring? Do we ring bells and celebrations in support of their retiring? Do we thank them for their wonderful efforts over the last 20, 30, 40 years? Is there a recognition ceremony? Not very often. So it's often just a great, see you, have a great retirement, go and enjoy gardening. When actually, are we helping our employees prepare for their retirement? So one of our team looks after specifically people going through retirement and preparing for retirement. There's lots of things you can do, which I won't go into detail about it because I've never done it. And what we do have is some lived experience support that can be talked to in preparation for retirement, financial preparation, that sort of thing. But employers do need to change their perspective on this. Not only will it make them a more favourable place to work, it's a nice, respectful and good human thing to do. Traditionally, elders are treated with respect, and we might not be as quick as we once were. I'm certainly not as quick as I was in my 20s, but surely that makes for a more balanced and reflective approach within the workplace. So some self-care tips. The first one is pretty obvious. Knowledge is power. We all know that one. It's a bit of a cliche, but it's absolutely true. There's the stress myth. So the stress myth, I mentioned stress before. Stress is a response in the brain. And there's two ways we can look at stress. We can be given stress and we can say, oh, that really stresses me out, or they stress me out, or I'm so stressed. When we say I'm so stressed, I'm owning it. Am I stressed? Am I putting that stress on myself? Stress isn't something we can go and pick from a tree or buy in the supermarket. It's something that we have to feel. So stress isn't a thing. Pressure, on the other hand, we can physically understand pressure. So the stress myth is about knowing that we need to be in the right circumstance. For example, if there's a tiger chasing you and you get a bit stressed because you're fight, fight or freeze response, then that is naturally stressful. If you constantly got a tiger chasing you, then you're going to get used to it. You might even become friends. And that's where your stress response changes. So it's a matter of choosing how we respond. And that takes a great deal of practice and mindfulness. Other things that help ourselves and our self-care are the obvious ones of exercise and meditation. Getting out into nature and really enjoying trees and water, green space and blue space together is one of the most important things we can do for our mental health, and ideally in a mindful way. So yes, listen to your story or a podcast while you're doing it, at least you're out there. But if you can do it with mindfulness, it becomes borderline meditation. If you're not somebody who wants to do meditation, then this would probably be the closest you would get to it. And it's strongly recommended for our mental health. So what will you do? Oh, and nutrition. We nearly forgot about nutrition. Obviously, eat well, you'll be able to perform well. Again, it's all stuff you already know. And be kind to yourself, be kind to your colleagues, be kind to people around you. Basic human kindness goes a long, long way. So how will you support your colleagues? The first thing I would always recommend is that you are aware of what's going on in other people's lives, not to the point of being nosy, just that you've got an awareness that somebody next to you is struggling. You're more able to support them. You can accept that your employee is going through changes. It might be any of those things that we listed before. It could be financial, it could be having children, it could be moving house, any of those things. As an employer and an employee, a colleague, it's really important that we accept that this person is going through stuff. We all go through stuff. So just because somebody looks like they've got everything together, they don't necessarily do. So just accept that this is part of it. Be that kind human being I mentioned before. As a company, we can take action. For example, we can work with you to put some reasonable plans in place to help accommodate the management of change in the journey of transitions that impact every part of life. For individuals, we can provide one-to-one coaching and with a number of transition specialists who can help support that process for you. And we've got a pool of people to do that. So coming back to you, how would you support you? What and who do you need and want around you? So I already suggested that later on or in the next few days, you have a bit of a self-reflection and have a think about the changes that you've had in your life and how you transitioned through them, how you coped through them, because that was your transitioning. So just to finish off, think about something that you might want to change. What is it that you want? What does it mean to you and how much do you want it? This is a mini coaching session. How do you get it? What will it involve? Who will it involve? When do you want it? Keep coming back to it and review it. You might find that you make changes to your change because you're transitioning, you're growing, and you're changing your perspective. So my new word to leave you with is transitioner, and Shakespeare and Roald Dahl can make them up. So can we, can't we, Simon? So I'm still transitioning because that's life. It's a series of events that require a response. And to approach with openness, welcoming, and no fear is a skill, and one that we're in need of learning in this unnaturally fast-paced world. So be kind to yourselves, each other, and find ways that work for you. Thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed the session.
Thank you so much, Ruth. I think there was more so than questions. There was a lot of sort of on the words that you were talking about. People were very much talking about control and change and stuff like that. So lots of really great comments in there for you to read quickly in the background. Has anyone got any questions for Ruth before we go? If you have, please put them in the chat as well. Just a very quick heads up: we do these every month. In the chat, I have just put the link to next month's. So even though we've just literally seen Ruth, there's next month's link, and that's Olivia Hamilton. She's going to be talking to us about suicide first aid. No one's put in any questions in yet. Ruth, my biggest question for me is, and I sort of popped a little bit into the chat as well. I sort of always, we talk about these life impacts, don't we? And I think you put on, my memory remembers correctly, I think you put on at least 12 life impacts. And we know there's varying different levels of life impacts. But, how do you prepare for the multiple life impacts? And I put it as like being, when you're like 2 years old and you go in the sea for the first time and the wave buffets you, doesn't it? And then you stand up and then there's another wave. And then you stand up and there's another wave. How do you put in that resilience to stop the multiple life impacts, potentially the bereavement while you're pregnant, while you're moving house, while you're, how do you deal with those multiples where you probably can't control it?
I'm going to use your analogy there, Simon, actually, as waves coming at us, because that's a really good way to put it. And again, I'm going to use the word that you used, resilience. Each time a wave slaps us in the face, we get a little bit stronger. Our feet can stand firmer. Even when the sand's slipping away, we rebalance ourselves. The next wave hits us. And, okay, that one got me a bit more in the face, but I'm just going to stand strong.